Hey, Steve Mignani here doing the junkyard crawl at Bernardston Auto Wrecking in Bernardston, Massachusetts with a 1953 Ford Crestline Victoria hardtop. Now you got to remember, in 1953, it was Ford's 50th anniversary, 1903 to 1953, the Golden Jubilee. And in Ford full-size line, there was no other. You had the main line, the custom line, and at the top, the Crestline. Now the Crestline was only available as a two-door hardtop or convertible. There were no sedans, no four doors, with the exception of the Crestline station wagons, which did have four doors. But the vast majority of Crestlines, again, were two-door Victoria hardtops like this one. And something about the Crestline was these were all V8s. You could get the six-cylinder or the Flathead V8 in the main line and custom line, but if you're talking Crestline, you're talking Flathead V8. And what is a Flathead V8? Well, in its final year for 1953, arriving in 1932, this is the Flathead V8 right here. And they call it the Flathead because the cylinder heads are flat. The spark plug wires go right in there. The valves are actually in the block. The exhaust ports are actually in the block. Kind of a lot of heat, but simple, effective, 110 horsepower. Not a bad little engine. But again, for 1954, the overhead valve 239 would come onto the scene, and that looked like this. Now, this is Motor Trend, or Motor Life and Hop Up magazine from February of 54 with the all-new 54 Ford. And in here, they describe how the overhead valve Y-block was a much better engine. And the thing of it is, it still had 239 cubes, but it made 130 horsepower in 1954 thanks to the free-breathing cylinder heads. We can see that circled green thing, the valves, the valve springs, the rocker arms, the push rods, all of those things, par for the course for any modern overhead valve post-war V8. Another thing too is, here's a shot of the port right here, nice free-breathing intake and exhaust ports right there versus the in-block asthmatic flathead stuff. And more importantly, this is the flathead crank right here with three mains, 1, 2, 3 right there. Not a very rigid structure, whereas the overhead valve of 54 went to 5 mains, and in fact, this same engine right here became the 312 Thunderbird engine with a supercharger in 1957. So really put Ford on the path to equaling anything from Pontiac or GM, etc., with overhead valves. So 53, Flathead last year. Something kind of cool here is just remnants from the past. This is the original. This is the 6-volt generator right here, the 3-bladed fan. This would have been mounted on top of the engine like this, right here on top of that flathead, sitting right like that. Of course, now just discarded and tossed aside. Let's go to this side here. Now, when we talk about Victoria, you got to remember that, for the longest time, cars with steel roofs had full door frames and fixed pillars, and when you're in them, kind of confining. Even with the windows down, you had these bars all around you. Well, when GM announced the hardtop bodies, I think in '49, it introduced the world of pillarless cars. So for 51, Ford played along. And when you see Victoria, you see the word right here, that is Ford speak for hardtop. That means when you roll this window down, this chrome rolls down with it. And when the rear window goes down, this chrome goes down with it too. So you have open air side silhouette. A nice, distinct, svelte, I guess, trim little B-pillar right here. Again, this is specific to the Victoria two-door hardtop. Kind of a pretty design. Interesting to see too here, the developments in glass. The rear wraparound window was safety glass, which crystallizes on an impact. By comparison, we look at the vent glass here, which doesn't crystallize, but rather is shatterproof, but it still can cut you pretty good. This has a plastic laminate between inner and outer surfaces, different types of glass for different uses on the car. But inside, every 1953, because it was Ford's Diamond Jubilee, the horn ring, right here, 1903 to 1953, golden anniversary. In fact, even Ford tractors would wear the Golden Jubilee brand all over them. This one does have a clutch pedal, so it's a 3-speed manual. The extra $184 for the Ford-O-Matic was not chosen here, but luckily we can see right here we still have the VIN and the trim tag, and we can see right there the VIN B3SV. B means a V8 car, 3 is 1953 model year, S is the Somerville, Massachusetts assembly plant. Yep, Massachusetts, more on that in a second. V is the Victoria body style. 60B again is the Crestline Victoria body style, and the paint, C is Glacier blue on the bottom, L Sungate ivory on the roof. But again, this one's a 3-speed manual, not the sexier Ford-O-Matic, but again, I'll take a clutch pedal any day. Let's go around to this side here, and we see right here, final year for Kingpin front suspension. Ball joints would arrive for 1954. There's a better shot on the other side, but there's that 10-inch drum brake. Pretty hefty sized drum for the weight of this car. This car might have been 3,100 pounds, so the 10-inch drums all the way around were certainly adequate. And speaking of the Kingpin front suspension, here it is right here in its final year. And you can see right here the coil spring, but this right here is the Kingpin. So no ball joints. And the thing about ball joint suspension in 54, when it arrived, there's something called anti-dive geometry, wherein if you hit the brakes really hard, this right here, the nose of the car wants to go whoo, like that. The rear gets light, swings around. Whereas with ball joints, the anti-dive geometry built into the upper and lower control arms, the car tends to not want to nosedive as much. So 1954 onward, the ball joint stuff really made them a better driving car. Now getting back to that 50th anniversary, this is a book called Ford at 50. It's basically Happy Birthday to Me, says Ford, released in 1953. And it's kind of cool. We look in here and basically the Ford history, the whole deal from the first Model A in 1903. Yeah, that's a Model A in 03. Model B, Model C, Model K, Model N, Model R. And then finally, the Model T arrives in 1908. But again, all the great Fords through the years. This book is awesome. When I was a kid, my library had one of these things. And here's the Ford trilogy. There's Henry II and Edsel, etc. And Henry Ford II, who lived right into the 1980s, I believe, and was there at Ford. But here again, the American Revolution, Ford, right there when roads went from mud to super highways with the Eisenhower administration. And Ford was there building cars to match the needs. Pretty cool right here, though, all these scenes. Where are these cars now? Where are they now? You can bet that 99% of them are scrap. Perhaps one or two is still around. But again, curb service, all the automobilia, and how basically drive-up service was a big thing in the 50s. Drive up to the library, to the package store, to the dairy, the cops, hot rodders. Kind of cool that Ford should even reference hot rodders right there. Yep, hot rodding was a major thing by 53, and Ford's in there acknowledging it. How cool is that? Some of the first Ford dealerships right here, and a man without a hoe. That's not a good thing. They're talking here about, of course, the Ford tractor taking over for the hoe, and how you can jump on your tractor and not break a sweat, drive around on your tractor. Old and young, old timers right there driving his old Model T, old Uncle Willie, and the old T in the yard, and of course the more modern stuff. But going further into this, we can fast forward, and it's kind of cool. They show steel production and how the River Rouge plant, which was built new in Dearborn, or Detroit I should say, was there making these cars from scratch. Flathead engine block right here. This is a multi-head tool right here, just drilling and tapping the holes for the cylinder head bolts. You can see little taps on those things right there. It's all done in one shot. And very cool, mass production at its best. Henry Ford, of course, the king of mass production, the moving assembly line, the welding, all this work, not done by robots. In many cases, human beings would press the buttons to get these things to do their job. But again, we go forward. And just how cars are part of life, modern manufacturing. Look at these, all these engines on the line right here. It's funny because everything you see in the junkyard was once in a factory, just like this, brand new, being assembled, being made. And just cool, these multi-head lines right here to drill and tap and bore and bush and all the stuff that's needed over and over non-stop, shift after shift. Styling, look at this, how cool is this? The prototypes, these clay models that were done, the prototypes, the future cars. And of course in 1953, the Thunderbird was very much in development. And in some of these pictures we can even see, and crash test dummies, look at this right here. These are more about ergonomics. These weren't actually being tested in impacts. These are rather about getting the spacing inside of the car to suit the typical human being. So crash testing and safety was still quite a way off. But getting back to Somerville, Mass, this is a map right here of Ford's various facilities. And the dots on the left, manufacturing plants, Ford assembly plants, Lincoln Mercury plants, parts depots, Ford of Canada. But we look here in Massachusetts, we see right here, that would be the Somerville plant right there, that sort of purple ball. That's where this thing was built, in Somerville, Massachusetts. So again, the Victoria, a very top of the line car, always a V8. And this one here has some goofy aftermarket bucket seats that somebody added in. They're much too narrow to be factory welded down here. So just, you know, the insults that happen to vehicles as they get into the hands of their second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth owners. But above the glove compartment door, the little V8 logo right there, how cool is that? The passenger gets an eyeful of the fact that he's riding behind a V8, not a 6, a cool V8. But this is something cool right here. This is from 1955, and of course, with apologies to A Star Is Born, the Judy Garland film of a little bit earlier, this is pretty cool. Let's go over here. And we talk about schools and indoctrinating kids with the idea they might want to work in the auto industry. This thing right here came out in 1955, and let's open it up. And this was sent out to schools all over the country. Inside, the teacher's guide right here for use with A Car Is Born educational kit prepared by Ford Motor Company. The film strips, the little booklets, and all of the follow along how to engage the kids in this as they watch. And the cool thing is, here it is. Here's a bunch of these little things right here. They're all the same, and these are the little follow along. So a little kid or maybe 2 or 3 kids would group together and watch this. There's the Thunderbird in 55 just hitting the scene. And then these things would go like this, and it's kind of cool. Maybe kids would say, I want to work for Ford. Who knows? Maybe Eugene Bordenat saw this and got a job at Ford, or who can say who was influenced by this to go work. But the beauty of this thing is here are the film strips right here. You open this little metal container up right here. This is the first one of 3, and inside of this, I won't tear this up too much, but here is the film right there. And it's kind of cool. When I was a little kid, I was around when these things were still a thing. Usually Scholastic Services would have it, and the projector's on to go beep. The teacher would advance the film, beep, would go like that. So, you know, long before the internet or the Skynet or whatever they call it this week, you know, old analog teaching aids like this from Ford to your kids. Now, if you're a GM family, that's not so cool to have that in a school, just saying. But over here, again, we can see the back of it, the trunk lid here. Okay, it's got car arthritis, but we'll take a peek inside the trunk. And once again, the term commodious applies quite nicely. The spare tire fitting into this little well vertically right there. It was kind of the way to go for a while. It kind of gets in the way, but still plenty of room in this. The original blue, and here's the tire changing and stowage sticker right there. After all these years, it's still present. Now this one saw some service. This is a home brewed trailer hitch right here, whipped up out of angle iron, stick welded in place. Got 3 stones for ballast. Got to have that. And so this car undoubtedly was, you know, served somebody quite well for many, many years. But again, 1953, final year for the Flathead before the pushrod, rocker arm, Y-block, Thunderbird engine would take over. Now, if you like this video, be sure to give us a thumbs up, give it a like, share it with your friends, and ring the bell so you're aware of the next video, which comes out tomorrow morning.